Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I've been following this Inventus Mining for a little while now because they have a conglomerate gold project in Ontario. And Conglomerate Gold is one of the big producers of gold in history due to the Witwatersrand project in Africa, South Africa. And we don't have many of those in Canada, but Inventus has one, and it's quite a exciting project. And so I'm happy to have Wesley Weimark, who's the president and head of exploration, on today. Thanks for joining me, Wesley.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
So yeah, it's quite a project. You got the conglomerate comes right to surface. There's been some bulk samples that showed very handsome grades. Why don't you just give us a little overview of the project?
Okay, so we're just east of Sudbury, Ontario, and Sudbury's a huge mining hub. It's got the Sudbury Basin with, I don't know, 100-year mining history of nickel, copper, and PGs. So, yeah, I'll just pull up our presentation here and we can go through.
Yeah, that'd be great. Pictures tell a story, and you got some great looking pictures there, Wesley. There we go. I see it now. That's the Pardo project.
Ardo project, yeah. So, we look at it like it's an advanced gold project. We've done quite a bit of work there starting in about 2009. Um, so what we've identified is these flat lying near surface conglomerate lenses. And we look at it like a low capital, quick startup surface mining potential operation. And we're in a great location just east of Sudbury.
And what's the access like? Roads and stuff, or
Yeah, you can drive right on top of the property. We've
wow.
done two bulk samples there, so you can get like 40-ton trucks right on top of the mineralization.
Okay.
So Rob McEwen's been a big shareholder of ours. And then just recently, this past fall, McEwen Mining came in and they're at 6% ownership now.
And I see that it's quite tightly held by retail and high net worth investors.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're 65 kilometers east of the Sudbury Basin. There's the outline of the Sudbury Basin with all the mines.
Yeah.
It's a massive mining hub in Sudbury. So the Pardo project's 163 square kilometers. And like I was mentioning, we look at it like quick and cost-effective resource development because it's so shallow. And that also goes for the surface mining potential because you only have to blast off a few meters of cap rock and you're right on top of the ore. So if
In
you
some
look at it
places,
like,
it daylight, right?
yeah, that's where we've taken our bulk samples, right where it projects to surface.
Okay.
Um, so we look at ourselves like we're not your typical Ontario gold project. We have the only paleoplacer in North America. Yeah, the project's got great year-round access, potential for off-site toll milling. And why we're chasing a paleoplacer is they host some world-class deposits. There's the Witwatersrand in South Africa, which has produced about 40% of all the gold ever mined in the world. And then there's Jacobina in Brazil, Tarkwa in
And
Ghana.
that which waters around, that's also narrow, flat lying, right?
Yeah, they get these things called carbon leaders. And Sometimes they're only like a centimeter thick, but they run like 1,000 grams per ton.
Wow.
And they have that, and then that's been reworked by the fluvial conglomerates, and then you get these conglomerate sheets that they mine for very, very vast areas. Like there's one area, I think they drill it at like a kilometer center, and
Oh,
they put a resource together on that, and they have confidence to go in there and mine it. So Pardo's a little different, but it's very shallow. And we're sort of targeting the area where it's right at surface to about 50 meters deep. And from our bulk sampling, we know there's no penalty metals, no arsenic, antimony, mercury, bismuth, or lead.
okay.
We've put in 240 drill holes in the proximal, like shallow area, and that's outlined sort of our exploration target of 16.8 million tons, which I can get into.
Now, is that past or is that including like you guys are currently doing about 80 holes, aren't you?
Yeah, we finished that in the end of December,
Yeah.
and we've put out one release with the first 24 holes, and we're about to release the remaining 56.
Okay. So
So
they're part of that
this doesn't
240.
include that, no. You have to
So,
add that to that number.
so another 320
Yeah.
okay.
Why we think we're sort of advanced is we've got a bulk sample permit for 50,000 tons. So we turned the project into advanced exploration because we knew early on there was a high variability of the gold grade.
Uh-huh.
And this latest program we did, we went with PQ core, which is pretty large. It's the largest diamond drill core you can do. And
Yeah.
we did that just to try to reduce the variability of the grade.
Now, Novo had an exciting for a time conglomerate project in Australia, but that was more nuggety, big chunks of gold. And that sounds good on paper, but sometimes having that fine grain gold that's well disseminated is a lot better. And I saw some pan concentrates in your presentation, so it looks like you're getting more of that fine grain, which is what which Waters Run was made up of, right?
Yeah, so from our exploration and some studies we've done, 90% of our gold is around 15 micron.
Okay,
So it occurs in clusters. So it kind of occurs in the rock like a nugget. But when you pulverize the sample, you can liberate those fine grains, and then it's easier to get a grade of the unit that way.
okay.
So as I was mentioning before, like why explore for paleoplasters? It could be very large. So the Wits water strands produced, I think, around 1.5 billion ounces, which just dwarfs all other deposits. And then Tarkwa in Ghana is 35 million ounces. Jacobina is at almost four, and I think they have new resources. That's probably going to be up to 6 to 8 million ounces. And Jacobina is kind of interesting because that deposit got sat on for many, many years, and nobody really understood it. And that's sort of changed now, and it's turning out to be a world-class deposit.
And what was the change? What was there something that happened there that technically, or what made the change?
I'm not exactly sure, but there's a lot of like artisanal mining there that they saw. And then I think they just did the right exploration work and eventually figured out that where these higher grade channels were and started defining them and started having success.
Okay.
So sort of a bit of a history of our Pardo. So the project has 100 or 511 drill holes. And doing that, we've identified sort of five areas where it projects to surface. And that's sort of where we had our first success at figuring out where the mineralization was. And we channel sampled across the conglomerate horizon, the mineralized one, and we got 140 meters of 5.2 grams.
Wow. Is that strike, right?
Yeah, it's kind of you're in and on top of the conglomerate layer.
Okay.
But that really changed things for us because we had quite a few small drill holes and we were getting spiky assays and we were kind of at a loss of if this thing contained mineralization everywhere. And it wasn't until we got and we found it on surface that we started realizing, okay, there's just a high variability of the grade and you need to take bigger samples. And that's what triggered us to do bulk sampling. So in 2017, we took 1,000 tons out. Um, we drilled that with HQ thin wall holes, which are like the size of a grapefruit, kind of about that size.
Okay.
And that returned 1.55 grams with like the predicted grade from drilling.
Yeah.
And then we extracted 1,000 tons and we milled it and we got 4.2.
Wow.
So we thought, oh crap, we can't
Can't use small diameter
widespread,
holes.
yeah, we can't widespread the drill holes and come up with a reliable resource.
Okay.
So, 1,000 tons is all you can take under an exploration permit. So shortly after that, we started we uh we applied to get an advanced exploration permit, and to get that, you need a environmental closure plan. And with that, you have to have baseline studies, which take about a year, and get that through the ministry. And we applied for a 50,000 ton bulk sample, which we got in, I think it was 29, 28, no, 2020 we got that. And then we took, in 2022, we took a 5,000 ton bulk sample with, that one had 28 holes in it. So more holes than the original bulk sample.
Yeah.
And the drilling outlined 3.3 grams per ton. And when we milled it, we got 3.4. So we were a lot closer. And we realized, okay, this is just a statistical problem. We just need more holes in this thing.
Okay.
Um, so, yeah, this conglomerate spans over 11 kilometers. Um, it has an average thickness of about 2 meters. And all the drilling we've done and where we see the unit in the drill core, we modeled that at 16.8 million tons. And we're hoping to convert that tonnage at around 2.5 to 3.5 grams. And this latest drill program we just did is sort of the first step to starting that work to creating data for a resource estimate.
Okay. And
Um,
is the plan a resource, and would you fairly quickly run a PEA over that as well, or what would your timeline be? The reason I ask, Wesley, is I've seen a lot of resources get done, and then it takes a long time before any economics get run over it, and so it kind of sits there for a while and collects dust.
So we are permitted for 50,000 tons of bulk sampling, and that's something we're looking at is just doing additional resource drilling and pursuing bulk sampling because
Okay.
we've already done 5,000 tons. We know approximately the cost to do that. And with the uh, price of gold where it's at, it actually is very attractive to go in there and take more tonnage out. And that can also verify our drill grades as well. So we'll start building confidence on our drilling while we're defining a resource in the area.
Okay.
So just a bit of what it looks like. So this is a picture of the conglomerate there where it comes to surface. And this is the area we channel sampled 140 meters of 5.2. But most of the area it's covered, but it's very flat. So you can open cut mine it,
Uh-huh.
and we get like some spectacular grades like 3.5 meters of 9.8. Another one 2.1 of 3.3. So what we're hoping
And
for is an average grade of 2.5 to 3.5.
the interesting stuff about that, folks, is that the gold is not in the those boulders. It's in the matrix. So there could be some sorting that would help you out by concentrating the removing those boulders. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's something we've been looking at. We've done some scoping studies on that, and the conglomerate is definitely amenable to ore sorting. It's just we brought it to a stage where you have to start doing bulk ore sorting. So you need like 1,000
Uh,
tons, and you need to actually run it through the machine. So um, it gets a bit more expensive to test that. So we've brought it as far as we could with the capital that we do have, and once we get into bulk sampling, it's something we might add to the circuit, um, but it'll be capital dependent.
so the sorting would be to get rid of the boulders, right?
It would likely pick out the boulders. So we did um, XRD sorting, so it sorts it by density.
Yeah.
And because the matrix of the conglomerate has a higher concentration of sulfide, which is more dense, it was able to the algorithm of sorting was able to see that and I can't remember what the mass pull was it, but it was fairly good. But there's a lot of tweaking you can do once, and that's when you get into the more but when you're doing the bulk tonnage, you can start playing around with the algorithms to pick up maybe slightly less dense material and get a better mass pull of your gold.
Oh,
And
interesting.
then we also tested XRT, which looked at sulfur and zircon, which is only in the matrix, and that was a very good mass pull. I think we were retaining 90% of the gold in about 40% of the material.
Wow.
So that's a slower method, and those sorting machines cost a bit more. But with that kind of recovery from the sorting, I think that's something that we would probably pursue more.
Got it. And is there a dip to that? Like as you keep following it, does it dip down and you would keep on following it? How,
I could skip through here. So this is just some sections. So you
yeah,
can see that it's very flat. It's block
yeah.
faulted, so it's offset by certain
Fault.
areas are offset. Um, this is the clustering of gold fine grain gold grains.
So it's a bunch of little fine grain gold that forms into somewhat of a nuggety type thing, right?
Yeah, this is a hole we drilled early on, and we saw this. We thought it was a nugget, and then when I was doing my PhD research in Germany, we got access to a micro X-ray computed tomography system,
Uh-huh.
and we scanned it so you could see the gold in situ.
Uh-huh.
And then when you spin it around, it's actually a bunch of very, very fine grain gold, and it
Oh,
was
wow.
just smeared by the drill bit, and that's why it was a nugget,
Huh.
or it appeared to be a nugget. And so that sort of outlines our sampling challenges. We have 70% internal dilution of the class that are in the conglomerate. So only 30% of the conglomerate unit contains roughly 100% of the gold. And then on top of that, we get these coarser, we call it like clustering of fine grain gold. So that's why you need that larger sample size to capture all those and then that's where why we pursued bulk sampling so early on.
Okay.
And from that bulk sampling data and all the drilling, we shuffled the data off to Snowden Optero, they're a subsidiary company of Datamine, but they
Right.
did the resource estimate on the Beaton's Creek paleoplacer that Novo had.
Yeah.
So we brought them in because they have experience with these types of deposits. And so they sort of came up with a spacing recipe for resource definition. And they said 15 meters was good for indicated and 60 was good for inferred.
Okay.
So we went slightly larger drill core, and this last program we did, that's sort of the what we followed and started drilling it at
15-meter spacing.
for indicated resource, yeah, and 60 for inferred.
So, but that all those holes, what would the spacing be?
Um, I'm not sure. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's been several hundred holes drilled on that project. What is the spacing? Is it up to this indicated resource
Oh, okay.
grid or
Yeah, a lot of the previous holes we did were like your standard NQ size,
yeah.
and we drilled it all over the 11-kilometer strike
Oh, I get it. So you need to use the larger core on that spacing in order
on
to
that
have,
spacing,
I
and
got it.
that's what we figured out from the bulk sample. Like we did large diameter core inside the bulk samples at 5 meter centers before we extracted it,
Yeah.
and basically just passed on that data to Snowden Optero, and then they came up with this for us.
Okay.
And this just basically I just already discussed this, but that's our 007 bulk sample area. We took 5,000 tons. We got 438 troy ounces recovered. So 94% recovery, and that was done at a mill with gravity and flotation.
Wow.
And then this was the first bulk sample. We took 1,000 tons out of here, got
So it's all
120
coming
troy.
out with gravity and flotation.
Yeah, and this was done at the Fox Mill, McEwen's Fox Mill, and that's a carbon and leach.
Yeah.
And we got 93, but we think we could have got a little better. But during that bulk sample, it was the middle of winter, and one of their agitator tanks in the cyanide circuit went down.
Uh-huh.
So we think we probably would have got 94, 95. So very good metallurgical recoveries of the gold, which is standard of placer deposits because it's free gold in the rock.
Okay. So that's the distance, about 500 meters between the two bulk sample locations.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
this
the
is a
grid there, that's based on the grade in your drill holes, right?
this is all the drill holes, yeah.
Okay.
So what we're looking at doing is replacing these smaller diameter. This is a mix of large diameter core and small diameter core.
Yeah.
So the latest drill program we did, we went back in this area and we're basically replacing some of the smaller diameter core, which is it's got too high of variability.
Okay.
So this is where we're basically starting to generate resource or data for a resource estimate.
And you don't have to drill thick holes. You can basically punch a bunch of holes, 20-meter holes, right?
Yeah, like we
It's a,
drilled, it was 1,100-meter program. We got 80 holes. I think the average depth was 14 meters.
wow.
We were able to drill up to 7 holes a day, about 60 meters
Wow.
or per 24 hours. So was fast and furious.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but that just goes to show like that, yeah, this thing's shallow, and it can be converted into a resource relatively quickly
Really
because
quickly
because
and
it's flat and shallow.
inexpensively. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So sort of looking at what we see presently, This is where it's very shallow, and we've been defining, well, that's where our 80 hole drill program was located.
Yeah.
But a lot of the smaller diameter core, we see the unit, so we were able to model it in these other areas,
So
and it's
was there
still
drilling
remains.
in those other areas as well?
Yeah, it's just showing the large diameter core that we have currently.
Uh-huh.
So there's quite a few smaller diameter cores in here, and we see the unit. We just
Okay.
don't have a reliable grade on it.
Right. Okay. And
We're,
is it at the same depth about? Like,
no, so it these dip to the west, so the east side would be 10 to 15 meters down, and the west side of this block's closer to 30 to 40.
and do you think it keeps going down towards the west?
No, there's a hard fault right here, but
Okay.
it's open to the south, and it's
Uh,
still open to drilling in here. So this is just what we've presently modeled based on the limited exploration data we have right now.
okay.
So we're kind of looking at this like a conversion percentage. So this entire area, um, when you look at we know the density of the mineralization, so we we put that whole area at 16.8 million tons.
Yeah.
We know all of it isn't going to run because there's going to be channels and stuff like higher grade areas and channels. So we kind of look at it like, okay, if we can convert 60% of this area, um, that's 10.08 million tons. And if we can get it an average grade between 2.5 to 3.5, that's 800 to 1.1 million ounces. So that's why we're excited, very excited about this thing.
And what would be the cutoff grade on something like that? Do you guys have any ballpark idea? Well, you should
What we
because
have
you've
to
done
do is
all.
sort of trade-off study of what we would consider open cut, like open pit potential, and at what depth would we stop that and put a drive and start in and start doing room and pillar style mining.
Yeah.
So we've done some like internal studies on that, and we think when there's about 15 meters of cap rock, that's where it would make more sense to put an underground drive and do room and pillar. And the beauty of room and pillar, because it's you can do that because it's flat, is there's no development cost to like you start your drive right in ore, so you're
Yeah.
always producing ore. So even though you're underground, there's no development like a ramp that you have to put in if your ore deposit was
You're just working your way
vertical.
into the body.
Yeah,
I got it. So your cost would be really low, right?
it would be fairly low, and that's something we've looked at, and we think, well, back, I think it was a year and a half ago, and the gold price was way lower. We thought 3 grams would work, so that's could probably be lowered now. So
Okay.
this was our the red dots here where we put our recent 80 holes,
Got it. Okay.
and yeah, we've released 24 of 80. Um, we look at this as like a test for resource development, so it's going to demonstrate tonnage and average grade, demonstrate the surface mining potential because it's so close to surface, and get an idea of what it's going to cost per ounce discovered.
And then you would go in and bring it all up to probably infer or indicated, right?
Yeah, we look at this area and we're thinking like this black line here. It's not
Hmm.
our property boundaries. We own the whole area, but this
Hmm.
is where it's within 15 meters of surface. So we look at that like a starter pit in a mining scenario.
Hmm.
Um, but
So
within
that's
that,
where you would want that tight density of drilling.
yeah, that's why we're focused on it first because we want to build a resource on that area first because that would be where you could start mining it you'd go after that area first because it's so shallow.
Now, because you've done the work to get a 50,000 tons bulk sample permit, has that given you some of the work that you would need in order to get a mining permit?
Yes. So the baseline study would roll into the mining permit.
Okay,
So we've basically started on that path. Um, and it would go quicker to get a mining permit for sure.
got it.
There's also, do you want to, like, we have optionality. Do we want to toll mill this thing and ship it to another mill, or do we want to build a mill on site? And I think that's going to come down to how many ounces we can show with the resource.
Yeah.
Um, or we could do a mix, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at now is we want to pursue more bulk sampling and it could potentially be profitable and we could put that back into the ground to do more resource drilling.
Uh-huh. So, but when you're looking at a mill that only needs to use gravity and flotation, that would not be a huge capex, right?
Um, Sorry, my dog's barking at something.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, it would be slightly less. I don't know. We haven't gotten that far. I don't want to get too much in the mining. We are an exploration group. We're just trying
Right,
to define a resource, but
right.
we have a lot
Well,
of
when you've
options
got
because
something
it's so
sitting
shallow.
there that you can walk on, Wesley, it kind of like I know you want to keep exploration, which is what I'm usually pushing everybody to do. Usually I don't like hearing when explorers want to talk about resources, but when you're standing on top of it, and you've done some of the work to get your 50,000 ton bulk sample. It's almost like you're doing test mining,
Yeah. And that's,
right?
yeah, sort of the beauty of this deposit. It gives us lots of flexibility to do that because it's so close to surface.
Yeah,
But yeah, like we're permitted for more bulk sampling essentially in this area.
yeah.
And that's what kind of why I planned a bunch of the holes there to start defining the grade and to see if that's something we want to extract and bulk sample.
Okay.
But so far, the results are showing like good lateral continuity. We're getting less of the lower grade and higher grade spikes, and it's starting to sort of level out.
And that's a
Um,
product of using thick diameter holes instead of really tiny holes.
yeah, these things are about these cores here. That's the PQ,
Yeah.
and we do see little areas of VG throughout the unit.
Uh-huh.
Um,
With
but it's about
is
a
it all
3 inch.
associated with the sulfides there? Is
Yes, because it's a paleoplacer, so the pyrite is a heavy uh, mineral, right? So it's gonna during the as it travels down the river system, it's gonna fall out of suspension with the gold because they're both more dense
heavy?
than the
Yeah.
surrounding material. So you
Okay.
see pyrite legs where you get higher concentrations of gold.
But the gold's not in the sulfides, it's free from the sulfides, but they are associated because of that running down the river.
Yeah,
I
that's
got it.
exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, basically our next plan is a phase two. F- Prior to doing the resource, we want to do a phase two. We think, don't quote me on this, but roughly what we've defined, I think, is probably around 60,000 ounces, something like that. Um, just ballparking it. So we
Mhm.
want to expand that, and we think with probably another 3 to 5,000 meters, we can get into the 20 to 30% conversion. and it'd
Mm-hmm.
be a mix of drill spacings at 15 to 60 meters. And if we can achieve an average grade of 3 grams, we'll be in this range of ounces.
Okay. And with the rest open to just expand on with the tighter grid.
Yeah.
Got
Yeah,
it.
I'll get into the sort of bigger picture at the end here. But
Okay.
so this is a photo of us taking out the 007 bulk sample. It was right at surface, so we just drill a 2.5 meter hole, pop it, pull it back, crush it, and put it in the
Wow.
truck. And then for the deeper stuff below 15 meters, this is kind of what we envision, underground room and pillar.
Mm-hmm.
So once this gets too deep, we just transition into this style of mining. And we think it can work at 3 grams, which might even be lower because, yeah, minimal development. Like I was saying, you drive a ramp or a drift right into it.
Right.
And there's also less surface disturbance.
And as you point out there, it's always in the ore.
Yeah, and you can, if there's higher grade channels, you can basically just follow them.
Ah, okay.
So you could cherry pick higher grade areas
But
if you
you
wanted.
really wouldn't want to do that, right? Because you want to mine it all, not just
Yeah,
uh
I don't want to get into the actual mining of it yet. We're just in the
okay.
stage defining what's there.
There's the fine-grained gold.
Yeah, so when we were, that was out of the Falcon concentrator,
Uh-huh.
the bag that was collecting. I stuck a pan in it and just quickly did a pan and to see if I could see some gold. And yeah, it's loaded.
Wow.
Um, so what was very interesting about this was the gravity plus flotation. We actually got 70% recovery from the gravity con.
Right. A lot of times that's down around 40, 50%.
Yeah, with Archean load gold types, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we did want to process off-site, these are kind of the potential options.
Okay.
Um, we shipped to the Redstone mill back in that was winter of 2022,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, it didn't cost that much. So
Hmm.
these are all potential options.
And especially if you could concentrate it on your property down to
You
40,
could
if all your,
pre-concentrate it, yeah.
yeah, that would really, yeah, that's interesting.
So zooming way out and looking at sort of the big picture here, this is why I get excited about that Jacobina deposit in Brazil, because people sat on that for so long and it turned out to be quite extensive. So zooming way out, that this purple area here is that's where we sort of define our exploration target presently, and that's the 16.8 million tons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still open to the northwest. There's some areas to infill here, and then it's open to the south. And to the south, what's really interesting is sure it gets deeper, but we know there's conglomerate lenses out here. Like we've tagged them multiple times. It's
Mm-hmm.
just where we've drilled them so far. You're seeing things that are like 5 to 15 centimeters thick, and they're running from 4 to 20 grams.
Wow.
But but we haven't seen a unit thick enough to potentially mine yet. But with a paleoplacer, you know there's going to be channels, right? So we don't want to go down here exploring just yet because it's going to take more capital, deeper holes. So we want to sort of organically grow from the shallow stuff into the deeper stuff. But what you'd essentially do is you drill fence line of holes like we did here. This one didn't have too much gold in it there, but we know that some of these holes have some pretty good grades. So you drill a fence line of holes searching for a channel, and if you hit the channel, then you go a bit further south and try to tag it again, and you can
Mm-hmm.
chase these channels down to the south. And then this 16.8 million tons is gonna would
Could be
grow
much
substantially.
larger.
Yeah.
I got it. So you want to start out with that target of 16.8 million, try to prove it up, try to get into production, and then use that funding to chase it deeper and further away.
Yeah, it would just sort of snowball, right? You would define a resource up here, start growing it, and once we get a bit of a budget for more exploration, we could put our first fence line in and just start growing the thing.
And even that, you're what, looking at a few hundred meters, a couple hundred meter holes, right?
Down in here, yeah, like down here it's about 600 meters, 600-meter holes,
Uh-huh.
and you're seeing stacked conglomerate lenses throughout the hole.
Oh, wow.
So that's another thing is just like this sort of illustrates these conglomerate beds that we see.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
So not only could you get a channel in, say, the lower reef, but you could get a channel in the middle one and the upper one of the basal conglomerate layer,
Yeah.
and similar to the upper ones, right? So there could be multiple stacked reefs.
Wow, that's really interesting. Holy moly. So there's a lot. I mean, that represents what, 20% of your over, let's call it your overall area. The advanced exploration is like 20%, and it's still open beyond that, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like all of this isn't going to run, but we're going to
Yeah,
convert hopefully a reasonable amount of it. And then the same thing's going to happen down here. We're going to find these channels and start adding tonnage and grade to them.
got it.
Yeah, it's a kind of a difficult story to tell sometimes because it's so unique and people have kind of lost flavor of paleoplasters because they're so rare in the world.
Yes,
But that's what I'm trying to present to the market is like these things can be quite substantial deposits.
amazing. You know, which waters around is, like you said, 40% of the gold ever produced worldwide has come from that conglomerate system. So, you know, and it's pretty unique to be able to walk right on your gold pro system.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't down here you can't do that, but
No,
up
up here.
here,
Yeah,
yeah, we're right on it. So it's been a fun journey and hoping we're dragging it over the finish line here.
excellent. So, that's so you're waiting on what are some of the upcoming milestones, Wesley?
Um, so we got the remaining 56 holes to put out, and then internally we're going to start looking at what that represents for grade, and we will start then we would like to raise more money and do start the phase two and also pursue bulk sampling. So that's we what we hope to do is bulk sample and in tandem with that do a phase two drill program
Oh, okay.
and start growing the resource and potentially paying for it with bulk sampling.
Wow. That's another thing that makes your project quite unique. People talk about wanting to do that, Wesley, but they don't really have a path to do that, let's say.
Well, that's the thing. That's what's so unique about this project is, yeah, you don't need to put in a ramp to get into your ore, which costs like $4,000 a meter when you're putting a ramp in, where you're standing right on the stuff, or it's just below where you're standing, so you just blast off the cap rock and you're right on it.
and then you've got easy recovery once you get into it.
Yep.
Really high grade or high recovery rate once you start processing that material, and a simple flow sheet.
Yeah.
Okay,
This
there's
is
your
kind of alludes to your other question there. Yeah. Phase two. We'll see what kind of available capital there is for phase two. McEwen still holds a bunch of warrants, so we're hoping to get him to exercise those.
mhm.
And
What are
I'm
his
thinking
warrant
about
prices
shifting
at?
that into 2025.
What are his warrant prices at?
9 cents.
Okay.
So we're
So
trading at 10 right now.
yeah, so 15, 20 cents probably makes sense to exercise all those warrants. What's the dollar value of those warrants if exercised?
That would so McEwen Mining's portion would net us 900,000.
Yeah.
And if we got the full last financing, it would be 1.2. But for us, that's quite a bit of drilling.
And would that start to cover some of your bulk sampling costs so you could get started
That's something we're looking at right
assessing?
now. So
Okay.
to begin bulk sampling, we'd have to put up the closure cost of like the environmental closure cost,
Yeah.
which is I think it's about 400 and 480,000. So we would put that up and then you're ready to go. So literally you could start mining tomorrow if you put that up. The thing is the right mill, right? We
Yeah.
have to get an agreement with the mill, and that's something we're working on.
But as you said, there's not not that far away, and you could potentially concentrate your material before shipping.
Yes, I don't think we would do that right off the start because it is still a trial and error. Like you're gonna have to figure out the right sorting curves.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think we would initiate that in the at least the beginning of the bulk sample, but we'll see what kind of appetite there is for this bulk sample and capital available because it's
I'm going to
something
have to introduce you
could.
to a friend of mine that has a lot of experience in that because of his work in the diamond industry. I'll get you guys together. Really brilliant guy. I think he could help you guys out with some of that.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. So more drill results, and then you'll be doing some assessment work, scope studies, internal studies to assess how you're going to go about moving things forward.
Yeah.
Perfect. So when you're telling this story, you said what's some of the feedback? What's some of the questions you're getting? What are some of the things that you think people aren't getting about this project, Wesley? I mean, I look at it and I go, oh, well, there's, few $100 a ton rock there. You could walk on it, and you got the permit to do a bulk sample. So it seems pretty self-evident to me of what gets me excited about it. But what are you hearing?
The people that I do talk to are very excited about it. Um, we've just been around for a while, and I don't think um, like the big thing that hurt us was the variability of the grade. And people were saying, okay, you're never going to define what the grade of this thing is. And that's where we started bulk sampling and doing this larger diameter core. And I think we've kind of come up with the right methodology to start defining the resource.
Yeah,
And I think once people start recognizing that and seeing that how close this stuff is to surface and the grades that we're getting, I think there's gonna be a lot more interest. So that's sort of been our challenge, and I think we've overcome that challenge, and now just getting on people's radars again. That look here, that there's a lot of potential here, and I think things will start going our way.
Good. Well, like I said, I look at it, looks like a few $100 a ton rock there with today's prices, and you can take a bunch of it out and test and see if if it all makes sense and keep. I spent a lot of my career in diamonds, and that's why I kind of convert everything to what it would be on a value per ton basis, because in
Yeah.
diamonds you can have a half a carat, but the carrot could be worth $500 a carat, or you could have a carrot and it could only be worth $75 a carat. So I always try to, in my mind, assess what the value is of the rock. And so I do the same thing in gold. And when I look at that and that it's right under your feet, and you have the ability to go in there and do big samples, which will give you more representative grade, which is also important when you're looking at diamonds because they're so small. That It's a very exciting project to me. I'm not a shareholder yet, but I'm going to be.
Well, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, it's I think if this conglomerate was down at like 200 meters, I don't think we'd be having this conversation, but fortunately it's right at surface and that provides us with an opportunity to bulk sample and sort out this variability issue. Um, and because of that, we're starting to see what the true grade is with those two bulk samples. And we just want to keep testing it and doing it right and making sure we know the grade that is reflected in the drilling is accurate so that when we put a resource together, we can be confident that that is the grade of it.
Well, and the ultimate test to that I always look for is the earlier I was mentioning that I've seen a lot of resources get done and they collect dust because their uh, management knows that it won't pass the test of a PEA because they haven't done enough work. And It certainly sounds like you guys plan to do that work in the way that would be able to quickly move you into a preliminary economic assessment.
Yeah. And while we're like, we could go back to the ministry and say, hey, we're still having variability issues. Give us another 50,000 ton bulk sampling. And essentially, you could just keep bulk sampling. And if we're getting the grades that we're seeing, then this thing could just snowball into a mining operation.
It's funny you say that because that's how they actually do mining of diamonds in South Africa. They start out with a 500-ton bulk sample. If that comes back with good numbers, they do 1,000 tons, then 5,000 tons, then 10,000 tons, then 20,000 tons, and then they're basically they got a mine.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
and if
know,
the as we're like even if we grow, I think somewhere around 450,000 ounces or higher, I think that would be the trigger to say, okay, this is probably a standalone deposit and you could build your own mill there. But
right?
what's very cool about this is you could keep toll milling it while you're building a mill potentially, right?
Wow.
Because it's right at surface and we have probably almost 1 million tons above that 15-meter depth. So you could just keep going after that. And
Wow.
yeah, it's fun.
Well, it's a very exciting story to me, Wesley, and I appreciate you coming on the show to explain your story to my audience. And I look forward to us doing more of these down the road.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alan.
Okay. So there you go, folks. Inventus Mining. it's a very unique story. And I think it's one that you want to do your homework on because that pathway to revenue is right in front of them with a 50,000 ton bulk sample. They could keep ramping it up. And when I see that kind of grade and that kind of value that they can walk right on top of and take samples to get an assessment of, there's not very many projects out there like that. And it's unique because there's, as Wesley was mentioning, not no other conglomerate gold stories in Canada. And yet, it's an important source of gold. 40% of the gold ever produced came from the Witwatersrand project in mine in South Africa. And so these things can get pretty big and pretty valuable. And I think they got a great story. And as always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to do your homework and speak to your financial advisors before making any investment decisions. I've kind of made my decision and I'm going to become a shareholder of the company. But you need to do that assessment yourself. Have a great day and we'll talk to you soon.